Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday morning, January 17th. A large-scale pattern change will unfold across North America over the next few days and couple of weeks. It will involve the development of a ridge of high pressure in the upper part of the atmosphere that will extend from the eastern Pacific all the way up to Alaska, and it will bring an end to the stormy weather pattern for California. There's one more storm that will impact California and parts of the West Coast later tomorrow into tomorrow night. It will certainly be a weaker storm compared to the last few, and beyond that, later this week, through the weekend, well into next week at least, it looks like a warmer and drier period. Meanwhile, at the same time, upper level trough will form over the central part of the U.S., extend up into the central part of Canada, and a third player on the field in the upper part of the atmosphere will be a ridge of high pressure off the southeast U.S. coastline, maybe over the southwestern Atlantic Ocean, edging into, at times, the southeastern part of the nation. So just wanted to start off with a blank map here and draw kind of the developing situation here. We're going to have broad upper level low situated over the central part of the nation in this pattern, primarily next week and beyond. Meanwhile, there'll be a ridge of high pressure over the southwestern Atlantic, edging into, at times, the southeastern part of the nation. And this particular zone, right in this region right here, on average, will become kind of a battle zone between this developing upper level low associated with the cold air mass over the central part of the U.S. and this milder high pressure ridging over the southwestern part of the Atlantic. This will become the storm zone here, certainly late this weekend, early next week, all the way through next week, and likely into the following week as well. The I-95 corridor region, of course, has been lacking snow from D.C. to Philadelphia to New York City, and some of those areas no snow at all up till this part of the winter. This will be a battle zone. There'll be an increasing chance for snow in the I-95 corridor region, but because of that ridge off the southeastern U.S. coastline, it'll be a battle. It'll be a close call. Certainly, odds favor greater likelihood for snow north and west of I-95 in this kind of a pattern, and less to the south and east. But it's not to say that the immediate I-95 corridor can get some snow in this pattern next week and into the following week. But again, this is just kind of a very simplistic, high-level view as to what will happen in this upcoming pattern change, with upper-level low centered over the central U.S. and high-pressure ridging off the southeast U.S. coastline. Oftentimes, when you have a ridge in the southeast U.S., it kind of waxes and wanes. Sometimes it has a little bit more influence to the north, into the mid-Atlantic region, let's say, and sometimes it kind of goes a little bit farther to the south and east, and colder air can penetrate a little bit farther into the mid-Atlantic region. So this will be an interesting to monitor over the next couple of weeks. Well, now let's take a look at the Canadian ensemble run from last night at 0Z to see how this evolving pattern sets up at the 500 millibar level. Again, we have upper level trough and another one upstream here, south of Alaska, south of the Aleutian Islands. That will be the last in a series of storm systems that impacts California and the West Coast on Wednesday. This is the Wednesday evening forecast map, and that certainly will be a weaker storm system overall compared to the one that hit California yesterday, the one that hit during the past weekend. A weaker system, and probably the last in a series for a while as this ridge starts to pop up. We were always kind of talking about the 20th of January being an important time frame for this large-scale pattern change, and indeed, here we are on Friday the 20th with that ridge starting to pop up, and it'll be kind of a protective ridge, a protective pattern for California as it will end that wave after wave of storm coming from the Pacific Ocean into the western part of the nation. Meanwhile, let's go beyond and watch the ramifications. And here's that ridge by the time we get to the latter part of the upcoming weekend, extending all the way from Alaska down through the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean. Again, a protective ridge for California, Washington, and Oregon. Meanwhile, upper level trough is starting to set up in earnest over the central part of the U.S. And again, this is what we talked about up front, with low pressure setting up over here, high pressure over the western part of the Atlantic, and of course high pressure ridging here over the eastern Pacific, extending all the way up into Alaska. Again, we talked about this will allow for the transport of the colder air masses to flow back into the central part of the U.S. With this kind of a flow, we're looking at about a week away from now, next Tuesday, the 24th of January, and this will ultimately become quite a battle zone here. There'll be storm after storm impacting the central and eastern U.S. At the same time, the western part of the nation gets much, much quieter compared to recent weeks. Now, let's move forward here. Here we go. Now a week away into the middle part of next week, next Wednesday. Here we have that strong ridge all the way up Alaska, even north of Alaska. And again, one thing we'll watch for is cross-polar flow. This is the, excuse me, the North Pole right here. It's kind of a 500 millibar pattern. It can push cold air, maybe even from the other side of the pole, and it has been extremely cold in Siberia in recent days here. Some of that very, very cold air could work its way onto the North American side of the North Pole, and then move on down into the central part of the U.S. This kind of a pattern, by the way, can also lead to another cold air outbreak all the way down to Texas. And here's that ridge, that stubborn ridge off the southeast U.S. coastline that will allow for the combination of this ridge and this low, this to be kind of an active zone here next week and beyond. And here we go out all the way out to about 10 days from right now. This is all the way to the latter part of next week. Again, a ridge of high pressure over the western Atlantic, upper level trough, central Canada, central U.S., and ridging over the eastern Pacific up across Alaska and even to places north of Alaska. Well, let's take a look at last night's operational run of the Canadian model, the 0Z run. And we have a kind of a weakening system today moving into the eastern third of the nation. Go out a little bit farther in time, and you see it kind of falls apart. All of its upper air support is weakening, and only a bit of rain today for D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. Not a significant rain event at all. The surface low actually moves well to the west of the I-95 corridor region over the western lakes. This represents the remains of the storm that pounded California yesterday. It was a strong storm. It will produce some accumulating snow over the intermountain western U.S. The Four Corners region, for example, can get accumulating snow. Then we go out farther in time, and we talked about one last system in the series of systems to hit California later tomorrow into tomorrow night with some rain, snow in the higher elevations. Not nearly as strong of a system as the prior systems. Meanwhile, the storm that pounded California yesterday reaches the eastern half of the nation on Thursday. And this will become quite a decent rainfall into the mid-Atlantic region late Wednesday night and Thursday. Certainly more significant than what we'll experience later today and tonight with that weakening system. This will be a kind of a strong system. Then let's just move kind of quickly through this time period, and a couple things will be noticeable here. Drying out across the western U.S., but talked about how the central and eastern U.S. will continue to have an active weather pattern with that upper level low to the north and west, high pressure ridging to the south and east. And let's just move forward quickly here, again using the Canadian model. Here's one system in that battle zone region early next week, pushing up to the north and east. Again, upper level trough, very cold air over the central U.S. at this time, almost a week away from now. High pressure ridging over the southwestern Atlantic. Right on its heels, and that moves into the northeast U.S. Right on its heels, another system right in that battle zone region here, middle part of next week. And meanwhile, colder and colder air starts to filter into the eastern states. Again, the initial push may be all the way down to Texas, Oklahoma. then it'll spread to the east. This is 10 days out using last night's 0Z run of the operational Canadian model. This is a cold looking pattern here for much of the eastern half of the nation. Well, one final chart. This is the 10-day forecast map of total precipitation from the 0Z Canadian model. And again, we talked about an active pattern central and eastern U.S. with that storm track developing in this particular zone here, give or take a couple hundred miles to the north and west, south and east of this particular area. But meanwhile, California gets into a drier pattern. Again, one more storm system later tomorrow night will produce some rainfall along the west coast, but then they tend to dry out and warm up Thursday, Friday, Saturday, through the weekend, through next week as well with that upper level region. But the real active weather will continue next week and beyond across the central and eastern part of the nation. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.